With that, let's move on to this next panel. The topic is Engage, Strategies for Bridging the Generational Divide in Retail Workforces. Join me in welcoming to the stage our panelists for this one. Anjali Goel, Head HR, V-Mart Retail Limited. Let's put our hands together and welcome Ms. Anjali Goel. Welcome, ma'am. Dhruva Dubey, CHRO, Vishal Mega Mart Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome Dhruva Dubey. Rahul Jain, Head HRBP bigbasket. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Mr. Rahul Jain. Mr. Ramandeep Singh, Head HR, Electronics, Reliance Retail Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome Mr. Ramandeep Singh. And Mr. Yogesh Somani, AVP and Head HR, Mr. DIY India. Let's put our hands together and welcome Mr. Yogesh Somani. And now to moderate this panel, join me in welcoming Mr. Adhir Mane, CHRO Corporate, Raymond Ltd. Let's put our hands together for our moderator for this panel, Mr. Adhir Mane. Over to you.
Good afternoon. I can't hear good afternoon again. Good afternoon. Better. It's a very interesting discussion that we are going to have with this esteemed panel. I think all of them bring a wealth of experience on this topic. The issue here, and there's a conundrum I personally face, is basically about how do you actually build organizations with a diversity which is reflecting the generations that we have in the workforce today. Is there something that we can at all do for bridging this gap? Is there something that organizations do this as design or default? So there are these vexing issues that we are facing as organizations and as business leaders and HR leaders. What do you think are some of the challenges that we should probably be addressing when we want to build this particular dimension? Before we actually start and dwell upon this topic, I'm sure we are going to make this very, very interesting panel, because I know we are standing between you and the ensuing lunch as well. So probably we'll try and make this as exciting as possible for all of you. But before I dive into the questions and some issues that we want to raise to these HR leaders, I would want each of us to actually help the audience understand what is their perspective, what is that they bring to the table, for us to understand how we can actually face and kind of develop certain solutions. So starting with you, Anjali, if you can just share a few insights as to why we should be looking at all at this issue and what are your perspectives, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think as our theme also states, elevate, evolve, and engage. So with this concept of multi-generational gaps, I think we need to also, as HR, evolve in terms of our culture, process, policies. The inclusivity is the key. And with this coming in as a part of retail industry, the customers are also evolving. Their preferences, their product preferences, their shopping experience. So I think we need to more look from a lens how the customers' behaviors, especially we are based majorly in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. Yes, there are a lot of consumer behavior experiences that we witness around how we communicate to them, how we give experience to them. I think it's important from all the aspects. So like Adhir said, it's at times by default also, we do a lot of things to handle these consumer behaviors and the employees as well.
So Dhruva, over to you. What's your initial take? What's your perspective on this topic?
So thank you, Adhir, and thanks for the opportunity. See, I strongly believe that the world has changed. When I started working about 23 years back, I was the youngest, and I had a lot of gray hair, man. Generation divide was apparent. I started in banking, retail banking, and I was supposed to follow whatever was told to me. Over the years, especially after COVID and now the modern world, there's a time that the elders, seniors in organizations have to make efforts to understand the youth that they deploy in their organizations, and the proactively efforts have to be made to bridge this gap between the generations that are working. And this is all led by the customer itself, because customers are changing fast, world has become flatter, and now we are in a catch-up game where the seniors and the other generations across the organization have to make proactive efforts to lead this kind of a change.
Thanks. Yeah. Rahul, what's your perspective on this? If you just spend a minute or so helping my audience understand this.
Absolutely. So I think the first point comes from, accepting the fact that yes, now most of our organizations with different size of workforce have a generational, divide as such. I was just reading this recent report from McKinsey. It said that, barring total compensation aside, the second most top reason for a Gen Z versus a baby boomer for leaving the organization or for accepting job from another organization is very different. For example, for a Gen Z, career advancement is more important, while for a baby boomer, meaningful work is more important. These all reasons do feature in most of our exit analysis, but and hence, as organizations, we need to accept the fact that, whichever way we want to go, we want to kind of handle this generation divide problem through design or by default. We accept that, yes, there is a generational divide that exists, and therefore, some of our solutions need to be catered very differently so that, we end up retaining all of our good employees. So I think the first thing would come with acknowledging that there is, there is a need for attention to this particular issue.
Okay, Raman, what's your perspective?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So, this has become a very, very important part of our life. I look at differently. It is not only about the organization, I think it is part of our life. So, right from our families to the organization or wherever we go, everywhere there is this challenge of dealing with the new preferences and the different way of thinking. Our families, we do struggle, at least I do struggle with my children. I thought, there will never be a gap between, I continuously kept on updating myself, but they are wired differently. So that's a key challenge, whether it is family or life or organization. And a lot of things play a very, very important role. Tech plays a very, very important role, customer preferences. So all this has become very, very challenging as well as very, very important.
Thanks. What's your perspective, Yogesh?
Thanks, Adhir. Hello, everyone. So I think just a disclaimer before I start, my point is a little counterintuitive. So I'm an HR person and certainly not against any of the DEIB charters that, all of us as HRs we make. But I think I find it very, very, it's very intriguing that we form inclusion strategies by using divisive words, right? So generational gap, generational divide. So to begin with, we are using, divisive words. So it's very ironic. As HRs, first we try and put people in different boxes. We define them, this is a baby boomer, this is a Gen X, Gen Y, and so on and so forth. And then we make strategies to unbox them. So if you look at a lot of time, we joke amongst ourselves, our friends, family, ki, irrespective of age, we say कि क्या uncle की तरह सोचता है, या कि तेरा thought process तो 60 साल वाले जैसा है. So when you look back, I think it is perfectly fine for a Gen Z to think like a baby boomer or vice versa as well. You cannot correlate generational gap with age only. I think all of us, the differentiating factor is not age most of time. It is the macro and micro life events that happen, right? So yes, if internet came in 1983, certainly that was a major macro shift which will create a divide, right? All of us have been part of the almost free 5G generation. So of course that is going to create a major divide in the thought process. And of course, then there are micro factors as well. But largely, this whole gap thing, at times, we kind of overdive.
Good. I think you're saying that we are over-delving on this part and we don't necessarily see that there is any divide per se. So just coming back to the same question. So Yogesh, what's your perspective? What do you think that as organizations in retail or any other organization, do you think the ability of organization to kind of bridge this gap is by design or by default?
So a lot of times we try to design, but it is organic. It is by default that works more, right? And in retail, I think this challenge is comparatively lesser to other industries because the kind of workforce that's coming in, I think predominantly we are dealing with Gen Zs and Millennials, right? So, and while I understand we say that, Gen Zs are digital natives, but Millennials are not far behind. We've been exposed to technology for years now. And we are equally, belonging to that digital village. So I don't think from a retail perspective, there is a huge gen gap when we are talking about shop floor especially. So it is less complex. As HR leaders, I think the focus should be more on let it evolve organically. Of course, have certain checks and balances in place, have your FGDs, pulse checks to see, what different gens are feeling about it. But it is better that, we let it evolve organically rather than create strategies and, in the first place, start with exclusion, right? Because if you're creating strategy, first you are excluding someone already by telling, okay, I am having something for Gen Z, I am having something for Gen X. So my perspective is we pick it up from the software piece, the way, the world is moving towards agility. So we for any of the programs, let's be agile, let it evolve organically, begin and keep on iterating and make it better as you get feelers about, what's the leakage. Yeah.
So your primary focus is that let's kind of evolve this rather than make it by design. But do you think that any of the panelists thinks that by allowing to kind of make it more organic, will this actually damage the balance between? So Dhruva, what's your perspective on that? What do you think, how we can actually leverage unique strengths of each generation, help business growth or kind of make it more focused and try and make it more by design?
See, over the years, we have realized that diversity helps. And diversity and inclusion, if we expand the very definition of it, in my mind, generational diversity is also an area that where we have to work on. Wherever we have worked on diversity as an initiative, might be women, might be underprivileged, might be special abilities, it has shown that the decision-making processes, it has shown that the culture adaptation of organizations, it has shown that the leadership abilities of those organizations, and they become more in sync with what's happening in the context outside the organization. Similarly, generational diversity is the real issue right now because we, on one hand, have workforce which is aging, and there will be people who will be working longer, where the concept of retirement per se is kind of getting diluted. So we will have workforce where people of different senior ages will be there. And then on the other hand, we have, in India especially, large workforce coming in which is really good at technology, which is the backbone of all the organizations these days. So, and then in the middle are people like us who are neither there nor there. So we have to learn on both sides. So I guess on all the three, on both the ends, and also in the middle, there is a need that we should be having interventions in the organizations where people across generations can hold hands, and things like coaching, things like mentoring, considering these specific things of generational gaps, plus the concept of reverse mentoring, where our leaders are encouraged to learn from the youngsters or people across other generations, that kind of a culture building we should be doing.
Good. I think, so you are more saying and veering towards the point that it should be more by design as opposed to probably by default. Fair. So I think moving on to with the same issue, Anjali, what do you think? What are the expectations of each generation? How do you actually bridge that gap? So what do you actually, how do you cater for this particular need of each different generations within the organization? So what do you think are some of the things, and if you can actually illustrate certain use cases around this, will help the audience to understand how they can actually kind of learn from what you're sharing here.
So basically, everything, there has to be a process around how we train them. So the training practices have changed, how we make those bite-sized learning and training modules from them, the communication channels. So their career aspirations have actually changed. So they want a fast-track growth path and not non-linear ones, basically. So basically, with this digitalization also, we've done a lot of initiative in terms of reverse mentoring also, a lot of practices where we create subject matter experts and we train people, so, all across, whether it's a warehouse, whether it's a store, whether it's a corporate office. I think, yes, initially there was a pushback, but when we had some role plays and all, the culture also of inclusivity and the learning culture has evolved a lot. So I think that's the game, that how we actually influence them. And it's also a mindset issue. There are a lot of perceptions actually in that, whether it's a Gen Z or a baby mover or Gen X. I think how we crack that and how do we ensure that we have to digitalize our ways of whether it's training, whether it's giving performance management also in that sense, and also continuous feedback.
So we also spoke about, some of the panelists, about reverse mentoring as a concept. But if Rahul, you can actually help us understand, are there any use cases that you find within the industry and where you think how this has been utilized, which will help us to understand how exactly this has been kind of implemented in your organization or some other organization that you must have probably worked?
Sure. So I think, before this discussion, we were all, sitting up and chatting, and we discussed this case of Ratan Tata, where, Dhruv pointed out that he did actually call all the startup founders to help understand how now in the new age, the organization should function differently, right? That's a big example set by, very esteemed gentlemen. So I think at bigbasket, what we realized is that the moment we start saying that years of experience, which typically would lead to an expertise in a particular field, may not be making probably a very objective, calculation. So we said that all our systems and processes are going to be based on roles and competencies. To give you an example, it is very, our mentoring program is called as Drona, and we typically have close to around 200 people at any point of time who are being mentored by experts over here. So now again, this mentoring program is based on a competency expertise. It is very possible that you are having 10 to 11 years of experience, and you are actually mentoring a person who is probably part of another team, say in operations or in supply chain, who has 20 years of experience. But when we came to development of IDPs or development of plans, we realized that that particular gentleman is weak in that competency. So it is very possible that the mentor actually has lesser years of experience, but the reason why he is still a mentor, and therefore the reverse mentoring is happening in a way, is because he or she is an expert in a particular competency, right? So what at bigbasket we do is that we assign roles, and then years of experience is probably not considered. We consider the role expertise. To give another example, we have these very important roles for us which are called as regional business heads. My regional business heads, actually my youngest regional business head is 38 years old, while I have, again, a very high-performing regional business head who is 56 years old. Right? So at bigbasket, we did realize that instead of years of experience, yes, obviously you need to have minimum years of experience to have seen all the entire gamut, but we wouldn't be actually just going ahead through years of experience, but we'll be basing this on roles and competencies, and that's working very well for bigbasket.
So I think you have actually put some of the things actually in practice rather than just kind of not only it's a wishful thinking, but Correct. It's a great example of what you've given. It is role-based rather than generation, the really age issue. So Raman, moving on to you, what are some of the inclusive leadership practices in this area where you want to actually bridge the divide on generations? You have experience in your career so far. You were mentioning a few things that you've actually experienced in your earlier organization. So if you can just throw some light on that and how to actually get to the bottom of this entire issue.
Yeah. So inclusive leadership, we have been talking about it for a long time, and it's a journey. So organizations are investing This is a thought process which need to evolve over a period of time. So a lot of efforts are going into that. However, I will take a step back why we are saying inclusive. There is a certain unconscious bias which is there inherent in each one of us, which makes us inclusive or not so inclusive. So it is very, very important we deal with this unconscious bias, which is very, very challenging to me. We keep on investing in this area, especially in Reliance. We have a very, very structured framework. Over the period of time, we have seen some good results coming in from the workshops or the various kind of activities, workshops, which we have been doing. If I have to take an example, globally, there are various examples of where the leader has been inclusive or not so inclusive and how it has impacted because of the unconscious bias. We know the example of Nokia where they were having 70% kind of a market share and they had this unconscious bias of saying, okay, whatever we are doing is the best. And they ignored the youngsters and the feedbacks coming in, what is happening in the external world. And rest is the history. We know that, where they are, they just simply, they are not there. Another case which I can talk about is the Enron Corporation, which, 2001 kind of a saga. The leader, he has been a very, very high performer, very aggressive, but had that unconscious bias of saying, okay, the only aggressive ones, the louder ones, they are going to be the leaders who are going to push it. So when the leadership starts thinking like that, it starts flowing in the organization. And the point came in where it became the culture of the organization to look at those behaviors even at the cost of the ethical issues. And we know that, how much they lost it in terms of the business and all that. So that emphasizes inclusive leadership is very, very important. It definitely starts with the leader. And if the leader is inclusive, it is going to have a huge impact. And I think time has come where the lip service and talking about it in the boardrooms is now need to move to a more walk the talk kind of a, practice. And it has to start from the leadership.
Okay, but I think, Raman, staying with you for a while, I see you brought a very important point, the leadership bias or the bias of people. And how have you actually practically handled it in your current environment? There is certain experiences of that you can actually share? What are you doing specifically to actually handle this?
Yeah, so simple way, I think most of the organizations are dealing by doing a lot of workshops, doing training programs, making it a lot of awareness among the employees. But at the same time, there are some, very unique practices in last couple of years. We saw, one activity can give you as much as benefit as it can. So we started doing some of these, we picked up some of the movies which have showed very clearly saying, okay, showing generational gap and how we can, do the learnings. I think what we felt, while workshops and training programs are important, but something to do with theater is always interesting and it is time proven. And we know that, how many times we would have seen movies like Tare Zameen Par or Three Idiots or Do Aankhein Bara Haath. So whether it is today or maybe 50 years back, the situation remains the same. There have been both kind of leaders. People with who are high on age, who are, young. So it is both the competencies are very, very important. So we picked up this activity where we do very, very small half an hour kind of clips, with both kind of audience. That's one. Second, we consciously in the projects, we have made it very, very important to have both the sides of experience as well as youth, which has proven us, it is giving us better results. Third piece, which is, I am not a strong proponent of that, but we also have done is we have made it mandatory for some specific levels to definitely have reverse mentoring done, which is kind of a mandatory, which gets into your assessments and all that. So these are few of the activities which we currently have been experimenting with.
Okay, I think there's one thing which is not scripted here, which I want to put the panel on the spot, okay? These are all HR leaders of high repute. If a business guy comes to you and says, "Nahi yaar, I don't want someone who is 55 and above, Buddha hai kafi," what's your reaction to that? How do you actually push him back? And have you had experiences, and this is open to the panel, to actually help understand that you are building that generation diversity that you are all talking about? So anyone in the panel, which I just want to hear what your views are. So after Raman, anyone else as well, yeah?
Yeah, so we as HR, we have been struggling with that. We start talking about if youth, then it becomes youth. When, these are cycles which keep on happening. I think we need to take a bit of a moderate approach. Second, very important piece is, as HR, how much do we understand, how much do we have conviction while talking to the business leaders, and ensure those people, those decisions are successful. That's very, very important. And if we can prove that, again, keeping our unconscious biases aside, not to make the point saying, okay, I need to prove it, a 55-year-old or a 50-year-old can do a better job. It is on merit. So if on the meritocracy we are able to add value and we are convinced about it, I think no business leader I have seen who will be opposed to that. They are interested in how we can grow and how we can create a culture of, high performance.
So I think, yeah, so picking up from, where Raman left largely. So interestingly, we just launched something a week, 10 days back, called as a second inning project, wherein, we are inviting women who've taken real long extended breaks and would want to come back to workforce, and especially in retail. So I think as HRs, we've also, as I said, we like people, to put people in boxes. We've also kind of said, no, in retail hai, shop floor hai, so we can only have people of a certain physical agility or age and those things. But so we went beyond and we said, let's look at, let's completely, picking from what Rahul said, let's make it a role and merit driven thing, competency driven thing, and not really a age driven thing. When it comes to a push from business leader, I think you have to build a narrative which says that my initiative is going to help your business. The problem is a lot of time we push these things as HR agenda, and that's where we falter, or the business leader will not agree. But the moment you kind of correlate business outcome with your agenda, it becomes easy, right? So if attrition is a major problem, if there is a continuous churn, there are new people at store on and off continuously, so it's going to impact your standards, process, business, everything, which will ultimately impact the sales as well. So the moment you say, okay, I'm looking at second innings because I'm expecting this level of people coming in, and all of us know with our experience, we know that, someone in a 40s, 50s has a very, very different expectation from career, right? Vis-a-vis what a 20-year-old might have. A 20-year-old might, very strong chances, jump for a 500,000 rupee to the next brand. Vis-a-vis someone coming with a, 20 years of experience, a break, and then coming back at the age of 40, 42, 45, it will be different. That the female, they may not jump, right? It is going to impact your entire attrition piece, which means everything else follows, right? They may not, there will be a sense of calm with the bubbling energy of the youth. So once you balance and show how it is going to impact the business, it becomes easier, to kind of deal with the business leaders.
Balance that you want to show a business outcome out of this particular decision rather than make it more emotional or something of that. Anyone else on the panel, if he or she has some experience? Anjali, what about you? how would you actually respond to a situation of this kind? And what exactly would be your advice to your business partners?
No, I think also they are also well aware what's happening around. So life is not very difficult for us to influence. But I think what my peers said in the panel, I think they need to share what is the impact and what would success look like. I think they're also willing to take that risk now. If they see an impact and see how would it overall fit into the scheme of things. So I think it's not very tough to influence them. The tough part is for us as HR leaders, how do we present to them and how do we show that impact?
Yeah, you picked up the phone, Rahul. You picked the mic, Rahul. If you can just, you're very eager to share your perspective. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I actually wanted to share this example. Ramandeep gave the example of a 55-year-old person for a particular role. I had a recent situation where we had to hire the head of design at bigbasket, and he's only 29 years old. And the question then they asked when we were hiring him from the panel, esteemed panel, was, but Rahul, he's so young. And that's the reaction that we got from business. And our response, see, as HR partners, I'm sure we all play this role very beautifully. But our always response is why? So, if he's 28 years old or 29 years old, why he can't be there? And I think so a lot of the startup ecosystem has helped this, where a lot of our founders are below 30 and they have established unicorns. So at that point of time, I think only having data at that point of time when you are having a discussion with a business leader in terms of the skills that the person is about to bring, the credibility that is there on the paper in terms of organizations he or she has worked for, definitely helps us. It has helped us in most of the cases. However, just to add to another point, see, the organization, there's a certain that we are, as target audience that we are catering to, right? What our customers want to hear internally. Typically, that language will be spoken in terms of our brand guidelines as well. We as organization leaders also, however, can maintain certain tweaks in case if there are certain profiles that the JDs could be limited, could talk a very different language. For example, if you know that in this particular skill or in this particular role, you need people who are Gen Z, right? So the JD can talk a little differently because your target audience could be different. So while your internal brand guidelines remain same for people internally, in particular cohorts, like in JDs, as I was giving example, that you can talk a little differently. The context setting also, the language, the lingos that you are using can also be different. And we have done that at bigbasket, and it helps us attract more target audience.
Okay. We have not yet finished on this panel, but I thought it's an opportune time for us to actually invite certain questions. Probably I see a lot of hands going, so I feel that, why don't you go up and then we'll carry on with the panel as well.
My name is Peshwa Acharya. I have two comments, not really questions.
Okay.
Okay. And then whoever can answer. My first thing is, I think there is an inbuilt ageism built in India. Okay, inbuilt. It is, yeah, because we are producing 22 million babies every year. Our median age is 27. So there is an inbuilt ageism. In fact, from my personal recent example, there's a mid-size FMCG company, 400 crore plus, unlisted. The two promoters' age are 72 and 78. And I was supposed to take care of CEO and CMO recruitment. And they had a specific age limit. They are not even able to, so there's an inbuilt thing. Any comments on that? And I don't think either organizations or platforms or CXOs or CHROs are doing anything for that. That's my first comment. My second comment is very controversial thing I'm saying right now, but recently I saw a Netflix movie or serial called Inventing Anna. And many of you would know about this Anna, whatever, sorrow, wit or something. I'm not looking at the part which is the unethical part, but there's a part of it where, young people want fast rise in their career. Okay. Any comments on that and how do you handle it? I want your personal examples, not formulas, if there is anything.
So
Thanks.
I think, thanks a lot for raising very pertinent questions. I think definitely I echo what you are saying. Ageism is something which I think the HR community also has not taken any cognizance of, because if this thing is biased towards, 50 hai, I will not take, 55 I will not take. So I think Pardon me for saying that, but I think relevant question the gentleman has raised. So anyone can answer him in terms of what exactly as a community of HR leaders we can do to actually look at this vexing issue, so to speak.
So like Rahul mentioned, it is not about saying, okay, the age, it is about the competency. It is about saying, okay, if the person fits into the role which we have. So, and secondly, during our discussions, so one thing which I personally feel is, it is not about holding anyone to have a fast track expectations, because this is what we will always want people to have aspirations. And those things parallelly will keep on happening. Important part is we don't have preconceived judgments, thoughts about it, saying, okay, whether it is 50 years or a 30 years or with some disability, or saying, you know, how the individual looks. So those kind of biases, I you know, personally, I am a strong proponent of saying, okay, working on the unconscious bias. That's where each situation I look at from that angle. So we make our judgment sometimes we interview a candidate, right? Looking at the candidate, we try to make judgments. And there are many situations where we have always felt saying, okay, there is a criteria of 30 to 35 years, and ultimately when nothing happens, we end up hiring someone at about 40. So there will be multiple examples of that. I think as a HR fraternity, or even from the looking at the business, I generally don't, you know, refer HR as HR fraternity, because, you know, I strongly believe, you know, we are here to do a business job where the role is changing. So coming back again to summarize, I think it is more competency based. And if we are sharp enough, and if we are sharper in terms of our, you know, the HR work, we are able to prove it over time and again. I think that's where it will build a strong credibility.
Yeah, Dhruva, you wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
so this is a very relevant question, Mr. Peshwa. What I feel that there is a good news for all of us, because one is that the HR processes on one side are becoming more competency objective based. Then technology has become a big leveler. And when we unpeel this generation divide and gap that we are discussing, there are people, like when we say the senior in the organization, who are coming out as very young. And there are young people who are coming out as very old in our traditional understanding of the people. Because in my mind now, the more experiments I have done in hiring, promotions, identifying talent for different people, it is coming out as a mindset. What kind of a mindset? Typically, earlier we used to say that the old is like stable mindset, young is, you know, will be a growth mindset, but that's not true in many cases. As he said, in fact, when he was, my friend was saying that we put this age criteria in a lot of JDs. Honestly, while making a final decision in last 50 years I would have made, I would have not even cross-checked with my JD that what age was my description out there. It would have ultimately become that whether the person is right fit for the organization, right skills, right knowledge, agility, speed. Those are the kind of things that are becoming more pertinent in our decision making going forward than this ageism that we are afraid of.
Okay. Yep. So you want to say something?
Just one very quick response to your inventing Anna. I think that's, I think the problem was more on imposter, being an imposter. I agree with you, however, career advancement, and we want more very quickly, maybe more prominent with the youngsters. And I think so that's why as organizations we have changed, you know, as organizations now we are not only talking about bands, we are talking about grades, right? Why did organizations decide to kind of come up with a grade concept within the bands? That's because they can show faster growth. And, you know, while we all as HR professionals know it's in the end, a grade movement is a progression, but we still brand it as a promotion because we want the youngsters to feel that they're growing every now and then. And I think industry as a changes, as a whole is kind of, you know, together evolving. And there would rarely be any organizations which do not have the band grade concept. So it's a great example of inventing Anna, and I personally love that series. Don't take that imposter in that. Yeah, correct. That obviously we are assuming that all people in this place have nothing to do with that. Correct. But the career advancement thing, that's what I said, that's how probably organizations dealing with.
There was a question in the back. Someone was very eager to ask a question. Can you just identify yourself and raise the question?
Hi, Pratiksha here from Reliance Retail. So we have largely been talking about leadership in terms of young leaders and how leaders will navigate this change, right? So I wanted to understand more from a holistic perspective, as in we are getting young leaders ready, like we have TAP at Reliance Retail's type of programs. So once these young leaders are ready, how do we actually ensure that their managers, subordinates and peers are actually ready and prepared to work with them without having a negative connotation to it?
So if I get your question right, you are asking about how do we ease in the young leaders. Is that what you are asking?
So how do we match them into the entire ecosystem wherein even the managers are ready to work with them, even their subordinates are ready to work with them?
So I think it's a lot to do with adaptability, right? I think, of course, as it should start from the curriculum itself. There is so much of focus on theory that a lot of time we miss the forest for the woods, right? So I think it should start, there should be very, very strong programs in terms of, how do we kind of get the young workforce to gel with the older one, right? Or the seniors, what we say. But there's also a very, very strong angle of adaptation, right? As human race, we are extremely good at that. Actually, a very personal quote. So my father, it's like a huge family, 7 brothers, 1 sister, and the age difference between the youngest sibling and the eldest sibling probably can be 25 to 30 years, right? And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, our regular household. It may be a case with a lot of them. But eventually you see that, each generation coexist, right? There needs to be an adaptability quotient. So the young leader should be open to learn. That's very important, rather than feeling a sense of entitlement. Okay, I come from, this college, so I already have certain wings. The reality is no. As long as you are posturing yourself as a seeker, rather than coming and saying I am an expert, I can assure you that any senior person in the organization will handhold you. The problem is a lot of time we come and say I have done an MBA from XYZ and I know it all, right? Which is not the case. So it has to be both sides. It needs to be from the young leader, and of course then senior will handhold you.
I think the monitor there is showing timer, but I just want to sum up, and in sum I want to share a few of the things that I've captured here. Is of course one of the things that I'm hearing is that it's better to have a design as opposed to a default. And I think also the other thing that I'm hearing and picking up from the panel is that what's my customer journey, and therefore do I do my staffing basis that in terms of what's the set that is required to actually handle a particular set of customers and so forth. So therefore the design element is coming forth very, very aggressively. I echo what the gentleman also said. There is ageism which is happening, and I can sense that is happening across. And as HR leaders, we have got a very pivotal role to play in the entire aspect and push back business at times if you find a sense of that and own that process. The last one, I think there is again a controversial issue which I want to raise. I don't have answers myself, but typically as you have in the West and where in UK and US you have anti-age or age discrimination laws which prohibit you from asking questions or about, which is a typical fashion, how old are you, will ask upfront. Whether India is a young country, and that's why I'm saying it's a controversial question, or Indian workforce is younger than those places. Do you read some sort of a guideline or legislation across which will actually help to not discriminate basis the age? Yeah, these are some thoughts something which we'll ought to debate, discuss, and probably deliberate and come back with some certain solutions. So thank you, panelists. I think it was very enriching for all of our audiences. And thanks again for your time.